You seem to have always crossed the grain of popular art movements, doing these flat, non-objective abstracts during the 1930s, when everything was supposed to be representational, and then in the 1950s and 60s, when, of course, the New York School of Abstract Expressionism was at its height, or at its beginnings, you're going in just the opposite direction.
Yeah, then I got, well, I mean...
Why did you isolate yourself this way?
Instinct.
Instinct.
It's like when I was a boy out in South Dakota, you're all alone. I miss being alone. I like the crowds, I guess.
Well, it seems, you mentioned before that the 41 or 42, you felt there was a change in your work, and it seems as though the 1940s represents the most intense transition in your art. Why don't you tell us about this interesting time?
Well, I know by the 42 or 41 to 42, I got this position at Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I left New York, and that in itself signified perhaps a moment of change. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suddenly became interested primarily in the human figure. Now that my abstract work had been very geometric, and I was fascinated or interested in the curves, the curvilinear element in a human figure. Plus the fact that, well, I like the human figure in itself, or a beautiful thing, particularly of the women. I was partial to women.
Okay.
And they had more curves than men, so.
Well, why did you leave the American Abstract Artist Group in 1943 after being chairman for 3 separate terms?
Well, we felt, and my wife felt, as perhaps more sooner than I did, because she resigned a little bit before I did.
Mm-hmm.
She felt we had fulfilled our purpose. It was being recognized now and had a future and so forth. We were interested in making that recognition. When it was achieved, then it became more a publicity group for individuals rather than for an idea, for a way of working. And you could see within the group itself, jealousies began to spring up. He had an exhibition, I haven't yet, you know, and so forth. He gets so much for paying that. Once you have a kind of success, that destroys anything of an ideal nature, I think. I suppose that pacifists would get bored with peace after a while. Not a war, I don't know. I hope not.
What influenced your decision to take a teaching position at the Carnegie Institute in late 1943?
Oh, well, primarily economic. I'd make a living. The projects were closing.
But did this leaving the New York art scene affect your ability to have exhibitions or your art in itself? Leaving the influences and the others that the other artists that were gathering in New York.
Well, it was pretty tough. You couldn't make it a living at that time as you're painting.
Even in New York.
Even in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was during World War II, so.
Well, sure. Well, you're talking. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Up to that ended in 45, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, then how did you come then to know Bertha Schaefer back in New York, and
well,
what happened to get you into that gallery and to start having exhibitions?
Well, the first show, one-man show I had in New York was another gallery run by a man named J.B. Norman. His art circle, I call it.
That was a few years earlier.
Yeah. He'd had a gallery in Berlin. I think his father had too. And he had this gallery, and he gave me a one-man show. But then he closed, and he recommended I go to Bertha Schaefer. They were friends, so I went to Bertha Schaefer.
Would you say that the 12 annual shows that she had of your works, starting in 1950, provided the strongest foundation for your eventual recognition nationally?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Or do you think that what you did during your time with the American Abstract Artist Group, do you think that was more important to your to making you known
Well, I guess the single shows, individual shows I had with her probably had more impact. But I couldn't have had them before.
Well, Art News selected your shows in 1950, 55, and 56 as one of the 10 best shows in the country of those respective years.
Yeah.
How did you view this recognition?
I was tickled pink, as you say, I suppose.
But then from the opposite side, I would think that Gertrude's death would have affected your painting quite a bit. Did it have a profound effect on your work?
It did, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say just how, because her work when I met her was still a little bit representational. And then it became, when we were together, completely non-representational. About the same time, both of us probably. I met through her. She'd lived in New York, and artists all around. And I learned a lot from different artists. And, but they weren't most of them abstract. Most of them were representational.